Tonight, there are references, I haven't used it lately, but to the world of acts and the world of facts, which in a way it's not exactly the same, but Kyroot means it's sort of like the primary world and the secondary world. That there is a world in which you can act. It would be like if we could divide man up operationally and picture that man was just almost an animal and all he did was act. That a man was nothing but his behavior. But then you got to picture the other world is what Kyroots sometimes calls the world of facts, and that is when acting is not just enough, that it is always preceded in conjunction with or succeeded by facts, that is some kind of talk, that somewhere along the line the act has to have been put into words. So, having said that, I said that. And Kyroots said, to be ordinary and to think like the collective is to accept, quote, being a promise. Could I borrow a pen? You understand that you're accepting the fact, as ordinary men should, that you are forever a possibility. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That is the way everyone else lives. That's the way you live at the ordinary level of the nervous system. But notice, any idea, if this be a fact, which I must tell you it is. I'm sorry I said that, but I don't know what came over me. All right. If it, God, I almost made myself cry. If it is true that you are forever a promise, just look at all the ideas of men believing that there's some form of satisfaction. Not open to any further discussion, any kind of chopping up, slicing into smaller degrees any metaphysical ideas, but just imagine if a good, healthy man, that if you're part of the same collective of everyone else, that you are forever, quote, a promise. Then, once you see that, then the kind of pseudo, perhaps jokes you think the Kyroots made about the only happy people are dead people, you see that it's true. Who does not complain among the ordinary? People what are dead, because there is no longer a promise. A lot of these are connected. I'm sure you people are astute enough so I don't have to point it out, but God, there's so many tonight connected. I just don't know what to say other than this. A lot of them tonight connected. And Kyroots said, a man's captivity cannot be adequately described since it is his very existence. This is similar to, there are more in here tonight also, about freedom and the idea of in some way being able to be less captive of the ordinary influences of life. And men have religiously, philosophically, politically, for years tried to storm their own gates and beat up on the heads and institutions of their own people about the matter that I'm being held captive. I would be better. I could fulfill my promise if it weren't for what? You. And if not you, then you. And then a whole bunch of you. That everyone would agree that in some way, you know this. Not only would you get men to agree if we wanted to say life is nothing but problems. Remember, we all agreed. You voted. I got your name. You voted that, yeah, they would. Next in line, at least, you could get everyone to agree if you said, man lives in captivity. I don't care if you're rich, poor, whatever, man just lives in captivity. People go, yes. And they would say, they would take the ball right then, and to make up a brand new phrase, run with it. Maybe tipping over, or tripping over the tip of an iceberg, and not doing whatever they accomplish will be far too little too late. Better than right. Men cannot describe their captivity. Now they will try. And according to the way they're wired up, they will describe that they're being held captive politically. And that's a very popular one, always has been. Or they're being confined economically, that they could fulfill their promise in life if they had been born under better fiscal conditions, if they could make more money. But if you really tried to get a man's attention, and he tried to get serious, an ordinary man, and you said, can you actually describe captivity? Because you can shoot holes, just reasonable holes, in all of a man's claims. If he says, I am so brilliant, if I had been born under better circumstances, I know I've got the great American novel in me. And you can start pointing out, well, what the hell has that got to do? If you got that much talent, if you got that much ability in some field, how are you going to blame some political circumstance? How are you going to blame the neighborhood in which you were born? How are you going to blame your culture? And you can get people to go, well, and yet they know they can't really agree because they know something is wrong. And what's wrong is this. Is what Kyroots pointing out, is that captivity cannot be adequately described because its name, its middle name, is life. It is a description, albeit unrecognized, but what men call their captivity is simply a description of their own existence. That is, if you were not captive, you would be fulfilled, whatever the hell that would be. I'm not here to tell you, and anybody that tells you is not here to tell you. They're here to make you go, hey, I like that, you know. When will you be here again? I'd like to come back and see you again. Win the audience over. But if your potential was fulfilled, then you're not in captivity, because there's nobody freer than a dead man. Huh? The full Kyroot. A man's captivity cannot be adequately described since it is his very existence. Addendum. Many people say, on out of here. But few do. I could do an addendum to that. After that, I'll make up one. Somebody else says, you mean few want to or few succeed? Now, see, those people are waiting for me to do another addendum to answer that. As he headed off to the city for the first time, one kid's old man told him, you can pretty well look at the info normally available over there as being part of a distress sale. What can we say? Available only through a knockoff, a discount. It is a distress sale. I bet you can fill in the rest from what I was just talking about. As I was sitting here in the studio with you, I noticed that this brought about a great deal of, I felt, sort of heartwarming silence. And Kyroots said, but at least somebody asked for it. Everyone eats their feet, but few of the civilized recognize the taste. Again, it's a pointing version of the fact that in the secondary world, you have a situation that almost belies that which would be the world of acts, the scientific, the physical world. That is, that you have, in a sense, so it appears at the 3D level once you see it, it appears to be the example of a perpetual motion machine, of a self-fueling machine, that man intellectually is the only creature that can actually get hungry and start eating on himself and survive, thrive. That is what the intellect is. That is what Kyroot continues to point out regarding the nature of plagiarism, that is what passes for creativity in the city. That's what keeps the merry-go-round running. Everyone eats their feet, but few of the civilized recognize the fact. If you tried to get an intellectual person, just an ordinary, reasonable, sane, upstanding, ordinary, intellectual person in the world, if you said, a man with credentials, a man with a Nobel Prize, and etc., and if you in some way could speak to him and make him hear just temporarily, momentarily, that you weren't being critical, if you said, do you realize that you and everyone else in the intellectual world, that you are all nothing but plagiarists? It's the only thing possible. And if he did not take it hostilely, just for a second, what could he make of it? He wouldn't recognize it. The taste is not recognizable. It's not supposed to be. Why would men go anywhere if they realized they got up every morning and got on a merry-go-round? And I don't mean physically out there working for somebody for the same old job. That's an easy version. But you get up, being bored with your job. Well, what is it that really gets people? They try to apply it somewhere else because that you believe that you can change your job and change your life. But here's what it is. You get up every morning, it's the same old job. You can quit being an attorney and become a bricklayer. And you get up, and this is still here. Every morning you have to get up and eat your feet. But if you're civilized, you can't recognize it. I can put it another way, you won't. But you can't. Because if a civilized man recognized it, he would suddenly be uncivilized. If a sane, intellectual person recognized that to stay alive at that level, he's eating his feet, then as soon as he saw it, he would no longer be sane and ordinary. If the understatement man was here, I believe that he might say that there might be more to being civilized than you ever thought about. And there might be a little less. One guy sighed, "The present is so sophomoric." Somebody asked for it. I know everybody got that one. Well, at least the guy, I would say that he was somewhat charitable. He could have said worse. And Kyroots said, as opposed to other parts of the human organism, the intellect only has itself for protection. If you consider the primary world and the secondary world, assuming again that if you're an ordinary, reasonable person, you don't have to be aggressive, you don't have to be a Southern Baptist drunken bricklayer, but let's assume that you're just normally self-defensive enough to stay alive, then the body will defend itself. Just an ordinary man or woman. If somebody comes up and pushes you around, they seem to, at any rate, you understand that under reasonable conditions, a reasonable man physically will try and protect himself. And he doesn't have to say, "All right, fist, do your work." Or if the way to protect himself is to run, he does not have to go, "Feet, take off." It is as though that the body has different parts of itself, operating albeit in toto, but it's like it has parts of itself that will protect itself. The feet, under some conditions, will protect the organism by running. Fist, maybe just an elbow to block itself. But notice, maybe it's a little tricky, but notice, the mind, the intellect, has nothing to defend itself but it. And I'm not going to drive you nuts trying any further to draw you a parallel to the body either. You just have to get it. I'll agree to this. You got to look at it real quick, because it won't stand still. It's why Kyroots put it this way. See, he didn't mention he leaves it to me to have to come up with this other stuff. He plain speaks. He goes right to it. As opposed, I'm quoting him again, as Kyroots said, as opposed to other parts of the human organism, the intellect only has itself for protection. Consider that. And consider the many things that Kyroots tried to point out about protecting oneself. And at the primary level, if you don't protect yourself, you're an idiot. But in other ways, Kyroots point out that in the world of ideas that protect themselves are invisible idiots. It's not an idea worth attacking. If it's got to defend itself, it's no multifaceted idea. The reason it has to protect itself is standing on one foot. So consider what the intellect is left with at the ordinary level. It only has itself to protect itself. If you begin to understand that, you will get some sudden whiff of a certain aroma of a certain kind of passion that people have in defending themselves intellectually. There's one thing to see people physically in conflict, or one guy just to say, "Hey, don't bump into me on the sidewalk and hit a guy." You might not want to be staying real close to him, but there's a completely different aroma to that than to suddenly a man start an attack on another fellow because he's of a different religion or that he has a different political persuasion. It has a strikingly different aroma, because the mind only has itself to defend itself, and it leads to, interesting consequences. Because I know some of you like the kind of backdoor version that any idea that you ever have that you got to defend, forget it. And that's when you need the understatement man, or that explains a lot man. But it's really too plain for anybody. Perhaps I don't lay on it enough because it's not very pleasant to ordinary people, but hell, I hadn't seen ordinary people here in the studio for years. Any idea you have that somebody, and whether you're doing overtly or not, you're sitting home minding your own business, listening to the radio or watching TV, and suddenly some clown gets on a talk show or on the news and he makes some comment about religion, abortion, voting, politics, and it is something that you've had an idea about that maybe you never thought about, but as soon as you heard it, you would like to say, well, you ignorant son of a bitch. Now, I don't care what it was. I don't care what it was. I don't care if somebody talked about your mama. If you got to defend it, you might as well forget it. If you're trying to be extraordinary, if you're trying to actually think, and it's got nothing to do with the content of what was said. But you got to remember that ordinary thought, part of its purpose, thought and speech, is simply to defend itself, no matter what the hell it is. And so if you feel the need to defend it, just internally, if you just go and try to brown some bread, by God, you're a toaster. Everybody's plugged in. But by God, you don't have to toast bread. They can even put their bread in you. And you don't have to toast it. But the proof that nobody seems to care, well, you may care for it. A lot of people don't write me letters saying, would you please talk more about that? But it is just an absolute, unconditional proof that anything you internally react to defensively that you heard, and I don't care, it could be about the revolution, it could be about Kyroots, it could be about anything, the most sacred, holy thing you can think about, if you heard somebody make a comment, and inside you bristle, inside you begin to brown toast, then you can trust me, you're ordinary. Right then you're ordinary. I don't care if before that, if you were on some great mystical level, like a flying bus, that you're up there singing with the gods and somebody says, anybody in a flying bus is secretly an idiot or probably wears women's clothes at night, and you go, you done Christ. It may not show, but you have Christ. There's the proof. It is only extraordinary thoughts. It is only thoughts that are not polar based that have no need to defend themselves. Because they can't be defended. It's beyond any grasp. Not because you're right and everybody else is wrong. It's simply they can't be attacked because they're not polar based and there's no way to attack them. People can say they are. But if you understand what the idea was, if you're the one thinking it, they can't attack it. Now, who wants real proof? Forget all that. I just made that up. God, I hope I did. And Kyroots said, from a polar-based view of our 3D world, it would seem that different things cannot occupy the same space, such as a bird and a worm cannot occupy the same space. But from a more complex view, just what I was talking about, they do. They can. Because in the ordinary world, what appears to be opposites, or even fragments, but opposites is easy to see, what appears to be opposites appear as being opposites, as being distinct entities, only on the basis that one of them hadn't already eaten the other one. That you look at and you think, well, I see two ideas dancing, and this one's leading. Or I see a worm and a bird. It's two people dancing. And suddenly, if they get real close, and you no longer see a worm and a bird. You either see a bird, or you see a real fat worm, I guess. Or you see the dance team, and it's the same thing. You see, well, my side's leading. Our side's winning. And so you look around, and it's like the dance has gone seriously awry because your side's no longer winning. But anytime you think that they are separate, it's just because you're just looking between steps. You're just looking, just the bird is just about to go. We're talking about ideas, of course. We're talking about men eating their own feet. That's feet to you people who finished high school. There is an appendage to this. Is that what you call them? It says, real rebel reconnaissance doesn't wait around to the last minute. If you only see something after it's occurred, you might as well be riding a bus. In other words, it's too late. By the time your own nervous system can register the facts of what you thought you experienced, when I say it's too late, years ago we went through some of this. It's easy to see if you want to. The nervous system, the high end, man's highest part of the nervous system, as the mind, is the last of your organism to know what's going on. Albeit that fast, but it's the last to know. And once whatever's happened, whether it was somebody else's thought being sent to you or whether it was somebody coming and pushing you, in other words, where it seemed to be at a physical level or an intellectual level, this is still the last to know. And if you're trying to be a rebel and it's based upon everything you know is on what you've observed sequentially, then whatever you see is too late. You can't wait around for it to happen and say, because ordinary people, they wait around for it to happen and then they go, you remember that? They're surprised, like, my God, the inevitable happened. But don't think you're getting somewhere. All right, think you're getting somewhere. If you think it's some improvement that the inevitable happens, and you go, not real surprised, more knowing, like, But still, you waited until it happened to go, it's too late. Now watch somebody say, well, how are you going to fool around with time? How can you know it before it happens? I don't know. Dial a mystic. Now somebody... Only $2 a minute, you must be 18 to call. I never knew where that meant. 18 years of old, you have had an IQ of at least 18. Don't any mystics write me. We all got to make a living. Anytime my roof leaks, I'll either call Gary or a mystic. And Kyroots said, well, it's actually our correspondent said, but you understand Kyroots said this. The, quote, truth of man in the secondary world must be propped up by words. Why do you think they call it the truth? Several people who know up from down, who know this from that, several people who know what's going on at the city level, said that not only do they not get that one, but them not getting it is proof in itself that it's not worthy of being got. Think about that. And on their behalf and his own, Kyroots said he rested his buttocks, his case. Ones I'm passing, folks, I've already mentioned. I jumped ahead of people asking for these. Either that or the whole thing is a grand facade. All right, a facade. I hate to brag. There were two here connected. Somebody asked for one of them. We're still back with the building, I assume, as some sort of metaphor, some sort of symbolism for man. Primary being living down further in your own nervous system in this condo, in this building, and up higher the world of facts, the secondary world. Kyroots said, people in one part of the building complained, or said, give me facts anytime. Acts are too unpredictable. Think about intellectual, good, civilized people. Do they want to hang around? Do they want to throw or go to a cocktail party, a high-class affair, where they're the only person there that's not part of the building trade? So some of the people said, give me facts anytime. Acts are much too unpredictable. While some folks on another floor answered, let us have some good old-fashioned acts. Facts are far too unpredictable. Rebels condo query, how can they be saying the opposite in the same building? How can they say the opposite? And Kyroots didn't go into this proof, but you can surely understand that there are reasonable people. More than half the world will do it easy. Half the world, at least, would say, if they were confronted with, I want to have to deal with the world of acts or the world of facts, and you gave them some crude definition of what I meant by it, half the people would say, give me acts. Don't get me around a bunch of pointy-headed intellectuals theorizing life away. Give me acts. Because you can't depend on facts. They always change their mind. Then the other half of the world population would say, give us facts. Now, I know we got to have the world of acts, and we got to have the primary world and all that, but, it's just too unpredictable. The people who are driven by that area of life that live in that part of the building, they are too unpredictable. So they're both saying the same thing, right? The query was, how can people in the same building, the same planet, the same organism known as the life of life, How can they be saying the opposite and be saying the same thing and be saying the opposite as well? And one man said that he would have nothing whatsoever to do with a metaphor that contained any synthetic products. I'm not going to tell you the connection. All I know is I looked down and it was noted here that there was a connection. So I'm just passing along what I heard. Keep me up to date. I'm trying to get in one or two. I don't know what to make of this, but I'll read it because I like it. It's my present. One guy said to nobody, it was his advice, he who will turn his back on adversity runs the risk of it turning its back on him. And one of the old soreheads says that he figures that one of the main reasons that men were given the power of speech is so that they could describe just how rotten they did feel. It makes as much sense once you get down to it. Doesn't make about as much sense. I'm sure that people who live upstairs and think that they're more interested in the world of facts would say, part of the thing about speech, have you never read Wordsworth? Have you never read Coleridge? Have you never read the Old Testament? Have you never read the poetry that is possible for human speech? I like this old man. He pointed out. He was an old sorehead, but he speaks for a large part of humanity. He said he figured that the main reason that men were given the power of speech is so they could describe just how bad they did feel. If that's not true, then answer me this. What's going on? Are we out? 30 seconds, eh? Just enough time to remind you folks to get those cards. And no, forget those cards. Because I know some of you that write in cards, then later you write in and say, did you get that $100 bill that I stapled to that postcard I sent you? That's nice to say. And then you go, oh, well, somebody stole it. Letters, not cards. Bye.